new transgender guidance for children as young as 4 in Scottish schools. It would allow primary school kids to change their name and gender without their parents' knowledge or consent. A 70-page document sent to schools says it's possible to come out as transgender at any age. I tweeted about it last night, produced hundreds of replies from people on both sides of the border, the vast majority expressing mystification that this could be happening. Typical, these responses, David Sands, who wrote, "Most Scots will be appalled by this. It demonstrates clearly how out of touch SNP ministers are with real people." Robbie Cross, "There are very good reasons why parents' consent is required, the main one being for child protection purposes, take away a parent's knowledge of what their children are experiencing, and who knows what could occur." And the SNP's Education Secretary denies the guidance promotes transitioning, describing it as practical advice which respects the rights of pupils. Let's turn to Richard Lucas, who is the leader of the Scottish Family Party. He joins us live from Edinburgh. Richard, thanks for your time today. What was the first you heard of this when it appeared in the papers last night?
Well, to be honest, the content of it is actually nothing new. But these principles have been underpinning the approach in Scottish schools for many a long year now. It tends not to come to the surface. It doesn't become a mainstream media controversy. It doesn't become a mainstream political controversy. But this approach to transgenderism in schools, I say, is well and truly embedded, despite the fact that I'm convinced a substantial majority of parents would find it very concerning.
Why the democratic deficit then? This is a functioning democracy in Scotland. If people find this so objectionable, you just go to the polls and vote out the people proposing.
I take the mic back now. Yeah.
That's a brilliant question. Now, my take on that, when you look at an election campaign, the mainstream media coverage of it and the political debate during it, it always goes back to the same old questions. They talk about the NHS, independence, maybe the economy, if you're lucky, coronavirus. They'll just go back to the same old issues. Then as soon as the election is done, in the Scottish Parliament, the attention turns back to the key moral and social issues. So we've got assisted suicide back on the cards. That was completely off the table during the election campaign. And this, when the SNP know full well that they'd have put this, front and central in their manifesto, it would have been an electoral disaster for them. So they keep it under wraps during the election campaign. And as soon as the election's over, they're back into normal mode, promoting this hyper-progressive agenda.
It's one thing to call it a hyper-progressive agenda. Can we just drill down into what practically it might actually mean? In a primary school, if a child begins to exhibit behaviour, for instance, they start playing, it's a girl playing with boys, quote, boys' toys, then we are saying, aren't we, I believe, that the teacher might then say, actually, we're going to medicalise this problem. It's not just a phase you're going through. We're going to set you down a route that could ultimately lead to some transitioning. Is that really what we're saying here?
But to be fair to the guidance does make it clear that non-traditional gender behaviour is not to be interpreted as transgenderism or gender dysphoria. The guidance is clear on that, so we need to be fair about that. But it presents the message that transgenderism is, changing gender is normal, natural, healthy. In fact, it's something that's good. It's something to be celebrated. It recommends posters to be put up in schools that celebrate transgenderism. So that's the context. So it's presenting young people, right from primary school, with this message that this really is something they should be considering their own gender identity. And if young people, children, do decide to express that, actually, I think I'm a boy, I think I'm a girl, when they aren't really, then the instruction is that just has to be accepted and affirmed. The guidance explicitly says, if someone were to say, that might just be a phase, you can't say that. That's detrimental to their well-being. When the message is basically, if you do anything apart from say, that's wonderful, what would you like me to call you? Would you like a new name? What pronouns would you like? If you don't take that approach, then you're really endangering that young person to the point that they might well commit suicide. It really is polarizing the discussion to that extent.
And the family written out of that conversation as well. I remember conversations about this 20 years ago, the idea, for instance, of a 15 or a 16-year-old going to the GP and going on the pill, let's not tell the parents, this is between you and me, the GP. That's one thing. People, I suppose, to some degree, got their heads around that. This feels different. The children are younger. It, in a sense, has effects which are potentially much more far-reaching.
Yeah. Remember the named person scheme in Scotland, state overreach into family life? People often think that's gone away. It hasn't. It's still ongoing. That's still talked about in this guidance. They're always talking about children's rights, by which they mean the right of children to overrule and to exclude their parents from the decision-making process. But the attitude embodied in this guidance is that the only correct approach, the only way of looking after children, is to affirm and encourage them in the transgender, in changing gender decisions. And any parents or families that don't go along with that, they're very definitely treated as a danger and a problem that the child needs to be protected from. In some parts of the guidance, it's very clearly giving the message that if a family doesn't accept, support, in other words, endorse a child's decision to change gender, then it really needs to be considered whether that family is a place where the child ought to be. And it really does go to that length.
Wow.
I mean, basically, the guidance is written by transgender activists with no balancing influence at all, as far as I can see.
Richard Lucas, appreciate your time, if not necessarily a message. Thanks very much.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.